here, and today I'm going to be talking about the consequences, now we've had a little bit of time to digest, on the sanctions on the Russian central bank, what it means for you and what it means for other countries. And we're going to be going through that briefly today. Had a few internet issues yesterday. Hopefully we are okay. But also I just wanted to go through another quick reminder. If you're new to my channel, I've had thousands of new subscribers. My job is to keep you on the right side of financial change. I wrote the very first published book in the world to include Bitcoin, spoke at the first Bitcoin conference, invested in over 100 companies, and created the world's largest platform for investing in Bitcoin and financial technology companies. Let's look at the sanction thing. But first I wanted to make sure that you are on the right side of my concept of Bitcoin and fiat thinking, because it's a quick recap. Bitcoin thinking is a state of mind when you've truly understood the value proposition of Bitcoin. Briefly, it gives you the ability to own your own money, spend your own money, and has a fixed supply regardless of geopolitics, regardless of any developer, regardless of anything, because it is backed by the world's largest distributed supercomputer in the world and acts as digital hard sound money where its supply can never change. So once you've bought into that proposition, and it may take you some time, but go back to previous videos, subscribe to this channel, and over time you will understand it because every individual company and country eventually does by my forecast. And so that is the concept of Bitcoin thinking, is when you value your wealth in Bitcoin, which means that you earn fiat money, and fiat money is the currency that most companies will pay you in, that you earn, and it's the currency of your government. And when the price of Bitcoin goes down, it means that you can afford to purchase more Bitcoin. When the price goes up, it means that you can buy less Bitcoin with your fiat currency. And so one of my fundamental principles for the last 11 years is to have more Bitcoin each month than I had the previous month. And therefore, this psychologically helps you get in a longer term time preference and psychology around price. So Bitcoin is incredibly volatile short term if you're looking at price, but it's been on a 13-year upward trending market and the highest performing asset in history. And so fiat thinking is the concept of looking at Bitcoin and deciding when you can sell it and when you can buy it so that you can buy more things with fiat, is how most people think. Bitcoin thinking is the concept of seeing fiat as a mechanism for buying Bitcoin. And so when the price goes down, you get to buy Bitcoin cheaper each month. When it goes up, you get to feel more wealth in fiat terms. So when you're seeing prices crashes, if you are concerned about it, it means that you're a fiat thinker. If you're happy about it, it means that you have fully integrated to being a Bitcoin thinker. And Bitcoin thinking is a lot happier place to be. You get happy when the price goes down, and you feel wealthier in fiat terms when the price goes up. So I found it to be a state of mind that I would like all of my financial freedom seekers to achieve, because it feels a lot happier when you get to be a full Bitcoin thinker. Right, now let's get into the topic. The topic of today is Russian sanctions. Now, it is a historical moment. I'm not talking about any of the ethics of war. I do want to say that both weapons of mass destruction and financial weapons of mass destruction lead to poverty and death and should be avoided at all costs. Because they do lead to the death of people and the destruction of people's wealth at the expense of a few leaders that are throwing both weapons of mass destruction and financial weapons of mass destruction. If you are affected by either of the actions of your leaders through either of those weapons, then it's more important to subscribe to this channel and get yourself on the right side of financial history. If you are not impacted and you're watching on the side, then we're going to give some commentary today, and your job is to get yourself on the right side of financial history before it happens to you. because cycles show that this will happen to everybody at some stage in some form, because Bitcoin touches on all of those political challenges and issues. And the only way to combat it is to have as many individuals that are sovereign themselves, as many companies that are sovereign themselves, and as many countries that are sovereign themselves. And the more we eradicate the need for central banks, the less war there will be, as history has shown, because central banks were created for the purpose of funding wars. Okay, so sanctions, what does it mean? Well, so all of the politics aside, whether you agree with financial sanctions or not, the reality is that a new paradigm has been entered into the world, which is now your reserves, any country's reserves that they hold at a central bank, what are reserves? They're the backbone of the system. They're normally held in the local currency, in the world reserve currency, and in other types of assets like loans to the world reserve country, like US treasuries, and then politically neutral assets such as gold. So that's been the traditional playbook. But when you look at each of those assets, you realize that every central bank in the world is exposed if it does anything that does not agree with the military force of the world leader. And so that is a signal for every single country and every central bank to look at this situation. And maybe, it's less extreme. It's not to do with war. It's not to do with invasions. It's not to do with anything, fighting up against one of the largest military forces out there. And maybe it's not about national security, but it can be sanctioned. And so therefore you have to look across the assets. Each country has to look across their assets and say, well, what's my exposure to my own country? Well, the exposure to my own country through my own currency is that we end up printing too much of it and hyperinflating its value. And so therefore we need to manage the finances of our own currency, but we control it. What's the next asset? Well, you look at the world reserve currency. So the world reserve currency, there are countries out there, for example, El Salvador, and various other countries that have become completely dollarized because their own currencies have become useless as a medium of exchange. And so therefore, when you hold the currency of that country, you are bespoke to their monetary policy. We are experiencing inflation in the US at the moment due to the vast quantity of dollars that were created in the last few years. And a trend across time. And so you have to ask your exposure to inflation. Then you say, well, how do you combat inflation? Well, you invest it in assets that pay income, and that is treasuries and bonds. And so now those are producing less returns than inflation, and you are exposed to the issuer of those, which is the credit rating of the US. Now, the credit rating of the US is still one of the best credit ratings in the world. However, for political reasons, those treasuries can be deleted, as we have seen with the sanctioning of the Russian central bank. So China is one of the largest lenders to the US, and they have about $4.5 trillion of exposure to treasuries and bonds. And those can be deleted for political reasons. China can also decide not to roll over the debt. And so when they expire, require the US to pay them rather than purchasing with some of the dollars that China is doing. Now, in times of political cooperation, there's this symbiotic relationship in which case it is very beneficial for peace, where a country like China has massive exposure to the US, and US has massive exposure to China, and therefore they are more incentivized to not throw the toys out of the pram, bomb each other with weapons of mass destruction and financial weapons of mass destruction, because they are more exposed. So the more integrated, the more likely we are to have peace. But at times of changing power, shifting trends, acts of that are politically differentiated, then you see the true exposure of these assets. And so what else is there? Well, traditionally there has been gold. And gold has provided that role. It became less significant than when we had a gold standard. So in the 1971, the US reneged from the gold standard, which meant that we moved into a fiat standard. And a fiat standard is where you can create as much debt as you want. The consequences are inflation and the cost of living crisis that we are experiencing right now. But you don't lose your gold reserves by having reckless money printing like we're experiencing right now and reckless debts. Because when other countries, when your currency is convertible into gold, when other currencies get concerned, or other countries rather, or investors get concerned about your reckless monetary policy, they can convert it into gold, and then the gold has to leave that country. But in 1971, when all of the gold was leaving the US, as a result of huge military spending and huge welfare programs, and everyone was requesting gold instead of dollars and treasuries, President Nixon removed the convertibility to gold. Now, today, they still use it as a reserve asset for one reason only, because you can store it. And for 5,000 years, it has preserved its value, whereby it has this mechanism where, as the price of gold goes up, it incentivizes people to mine for more gold and try and find more. As the price goes down, less people mine for gold because there's less of a reward and it's an expensive process. And therefore, it has this corrective mechanism that doesn't increase the supply of gold too much. Therefore, it doesn't get diluted, and therefore it has preserved wealth for 5,000 years. Now, the challenge with gold is the transportability of gold. And the reason that fiat currency was created was to solve the issue of how can you easily transport gold. So fiat currency solution was keep all the gold exactly where it is, and then we issue a receipt, and that receipt becomes tradable either digital or through notes. And therefore we solve the problem of international trade without the huge expense of transporting gold. But now the only thing that Russia has left is its gold, and because it's been sanctioned, the only place it can sell its gold is with a partner that's willing to take the political risk. Now, that may or may not be China. China has a very symbiotic relationship with both Russia and the US. There's tensions on both sides, but China could be a purchaser of that gold. Now, why would it want that gold? Because historically, after major wars, you have a monetary renegotiation. And in my videos, The Great Depression of the 2020s, I talked about this monetary renegotiation that is coming up. If you head to retirementplanb.com/book, you can get a free copy of Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust in PDF. You can get 4 free videos where I go through how to protect yourself in the Great Depression of the 2020s, and I invest live $1 million. And I last year gave a masterclass for those that really want to binge, completely free. Head over to retirementplanb.com/book to get that. Anyway, so what does it prove? Now, central banks have 2 problems, and governments have 2 problems when they're thinking about their treasury and sovereign wealth. Number 1, can the assets that I hold be confiscated? Well, Venezuela learned that when it stored its gold in the Bank of England, it was confiscated through political sanctions, and therefore it could not access its gold. Now, this is the same with most individuals that own gold. They hold it at a custodian because it's unsafe to store at their house, because if they hold it in large quantities, you have a challenge that most custodians are set up in order to store that in a lot better way than someone can in their own house. So this storage and transportability becomes a huge problem. Now, the other thing about confiscatability, so the only way you can ensure that it can't be confiscated, and by the way, it doesn't mean it can't be confiscated. If you break the law and they can prove that it is your asset, then of course anything can be confiscated by law, but it can't be confiscated by holding it with someone else and them taking it from somebody else. And so that is a different type of confiscation, as it were. The other thing is, will it be inflated away? So that's why they still hold the gold. That's why they did hold the treasuries it produced, but now a below inflation return. And they hold their own currency, but that can be hyperinflated through their own political exposures and the cycles which always incentivize governments to create more money in order to get more votes. And they need more votes in order to stay in power. And because they go for a short cycle, humans do not vote for people that tax them higher and cut down through austerity. And so governments, no matter whether they're left or right, will always go for hyperinflation over unpopular tax, unpopular austerity, or other measures, monetary measures. And so that is why holding their own currency becomes a bad thing. But what is the final lesson? The final lesson for every country as a result of experiencing this is the Middle East need to look at themselves and say, are we politically exposed to sanctions if we decide to do something differently to what the political military dominant power wants? China needs to ask the same question. Every other country needs to ask the same question. Latin America needs to ask the question. El Salvador needs to ask the question. We decided for sovereign reasons to make Bitcoin legal tender. That led to the IMF using their political might in order to influence us to make less sovereign decisions. It also led to a bill in the US where they're actually investigating the impact on the US and what they can do to remove the sovereign rights of El Salvador to do that and have influence over it. And so Latin America are kind of on a bit of a movement towards understanding the true value in owning your own money, spending your own money, and having money that's based upon a fixed supply rather than relying fully on the dollar. And so therefore, will those decisions lead to certain sanctions? If any country decides to remain neutral, for example, does that lead to sanctions? And so when financial weapons of mass destruction get thrown around for political reasons, when weapons of mass destruction get thrown around, every country moves into defense mode. And the classic, only and best way I know of going into defense mode is owning your own money, spending your own money, and having a monetary policy that is fixed and cannot be influenced by any politician or anyone in the world. That is why every individual, every company, every country, every central bank, if they are managing their money well, they will have some Bitcoin. And the Russian sanctions, although people are talking wrong things, which is, can Bitcoin allow Russians, people that are sanctioned to circumvent sanctions? Well, if they create immutable records on the blockchain and you are then creating evidence for crimes against humanity, then they create immutable records of their crimes against humanity, and that is a pretty dumb move. So it's not good for circumventing those sanctions. It is good for protecting innocent people and protecting themselves from the actions of their leaders and the things that they cannot control. So if you are an individual, you are a company, and you are a government that is not throwing away around weapons of mass destruction or financial weapons of mass destruction, then Bitcoin is a way of taking the politics out of money. It is politically neutral. It is regardless of geopolitics. While it can move and its trends can, then every individual, every company, and every country gets the opportunity to remain sovereign. I believe that more countries remaining sovereign can contribute to world peace, and I believe that Bitcoin can be a force for peace, love, and unity by allowing countries, individuals, and companies to remain sovereign. So my natural conclusion is that Bitcoin is good for peace, love, and unity. And I believe that is a worthy goal. So putting it all full circle, if you are concerned about the price of Bitcoin crashing right now, you are a fiat thinker. Fiat thinking is exactly, when you understand and unravel the mechanics, what ruins people's finances. And it is also what is able to fund war through the fiat creating system. Switching to Bitcoin thinking means that when prices go down, you get to purchase more Bitcoin. If you are concerned about your wealth going down as Bitcoin goes down in value, as it is experiencing at the moment, short term, then it probably means you are either just a fiat thinker. The easiest way to stop being a fiat thinker is to separate your spending account from your investment account. Take a percentage of your spending account, put it in an investment account, and then you start to think about, if I leave that in a bank, I get negative returns because of inflation. If I purchase bonds, I get negative returns because of inflation. If I purchase gold, I have to store it with somebody else, or I get to store it myself, and I get to preserve my wealth, not increase my wealth. If I purchase it in stocks, then I am dependent upon the central bank continuing to print money. If I put it in Bitcoin, I get to own it, I get to spend it as I choose, and I get to have a fixed supply that can't be changed, that is neutral of geopolitics. I believe that every individual, company, and country will come to that conclusion, and therefore, that is how you transition. Separate your savings from your spending, because if you're saying Bitcoin's gone down, therefore I can't afford my rent, then you haven't separated your savings from your investment account. So I hope that is useful. Again, I hope that every individual, every company, and every country will listen before it's too late, but I also know that most people will listen when it's too late. So here's my favor to you. If you got value out of this video, then please do share it with your loved ones. Please do tweet it, share it on Facebook, share it on LinkedIn, share it wherever you think people are that will be interested in this. And subscribe to this channel, because most days when I can, after I've come back from the gym, I want to give you some updates to motivate me to stay and go in the gym. I give updates to support people in what I believe one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. Those on the wrong side of financial history are having the worst time ever right now. And I want more people to be on the right side of financial history so that you can be on the right side of these changes. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell symbol, hit all, and YouTube will send you an email each and every time we go live to make sure that you are up to date, and that we as financial freedom seekers are all doing it with peace, we're all doing it with love, and we're all doing it with unity. I'm going to get to work. Peace.